Welcome to the Rising Society podcast. I am Shane Kennedy.
I'm Nico Galliano, the rejected gentleman.
All right, Nico. So tonight we're going to talk about something a little bit different than usual, right? We're not going to be talking about politics.
It's a little outside our wheelhouse on this than what we normally do.
So we're going to be talking about Egypt. We're going to be talking about the pyramids.
The Great Pyramids.
Right? So this month, today is March the 25th, and I think about a week ago, it was reported in the news about a new discovery that was made beneath the Pyramids of Giza. So there are a few interesting facts about this discovery that I want to read off. It was discovered using something called LiDAR technology, which I think is like a mixture of like radar and sonar. Don't ask me for the details on how it works because I'm not really sure. But these are the things that were discovered beneath the pyramids, and this is really, really interesting because up until this point, the acceptable story about the pyramids is that there was nothing underneath them, right? So, first thing, an underground network was discovered beneath the pyramids. A large system of structures was found stretching about 2 kilometers, which is over 6,500 feet. We're talking more than a mile beneath the pyramids. The depth of these structures runs down about 2,100 feet, which would be roughly about a half a mile, which is a little bit more than twice the height or around twice the height of the Eiffel Tower. Now, they found 8 vertical cylindrical shafts. So they're cylinder-shaped structures that were detected, possibly with spiral pathways going deep underground. There were 2 large cube-shaped chambers, each about 80 meters wide, and just so that you know, 1 meter is roughly about 1 yard. So we're talking about 240, 250 feet wide. Were found connected to the shafts. Then there were additional structures. There were 5 identical structures with sloped roofs and multiple levels, which were identified near the base of the Khafre pyramid, which is somewhere up there. And then here are some details on the technology used. So one of the means that they discover, or one of the means by which they discovered these underground structures was called synthetic aperture radar, SAR, which combined satellite data and seismic vibrations to map the hidden system without digging. And then there was also LiDAR technology as well. Now, this is the final little bullet point that I've got is there's a lot of controversy surrounding this discovery. So there are some experts and I don't want to butcher his name.
You're going to,
and I don't want to offend him. His name is Zawi Hawass.
Fucking butchered for sure.
Who is the director of antiquities at the Egyptian Museum that's owned and run by the Egyptian government. He doubts this and says that he's sticking to his story that the pyramids are nothing more than burial chambers for pharaohs.
Well, it's definitely
right?
advantageous for him for that to be the case, correct?
Right. So let's get into this now. So these are the discoveries that were made. These basically, there are a lot of details here. You can always look this up yourself. But the really important thing is that there are all this vast network of underground structures that were discovered underneath the pyramids, and we have no idea where these things come from, or we have no idea who built them. We have no idea how they were built. We don't even have an idea of how the above ground part of the pyramids were built, right?
We actually don't even still know what they are.
Right.
We don't actually know their true purpose. These are all guesses.
Well, and let me say something about the idea that the pyramids are burial chambers. And this is something that everybody can Google and look up themselves. How many bodies do you think have been discovered inside of those pyramids, Nico, since we've been excavating them, and really since we have written records of people going inside of them? How many bodies would you say have been found in there?
In the actual pyramids themselves?
Yeah.
Have any actually?
0.
I was gonna say I don't know.
None.
I don't know if any have actually been found inside
Yep.
the pyramids.
Not one body. So isn't it kind of weird that they're trying to say that they're burial chambers for pharaohs, which are the kings, right? Which were like the kings of Egypt, essentially.
Correct.
But there is a spot where archaeologists and Egyptologists know that they can go and dig for the burial chambers of the kings and pharaohs of Egypt. Do you know what that area is called?
What is that?
It's called the Valley of the Kings. Mm-hmm. That's where, like, for instance, King Tut's tomb was discovered, and that's where all the pharaohs' tombs have been discovered. That modern Egyptologists have been able to dig up, and they found all these vast treasures and everything because those are actual burial chambers that were used for pharaohs.
I was gonna say I don't know.
Right?
Yeah, it's never been one body found.
Yeah, so you know, it's just really, really weird to me that there's just as much evidence to argue the case that the pyramids were that the pyramids were built and used as burial chambers for pharaohs as there is that, like, I don't know, that like a Walmart supercenter is a burial chamber built for pharaohs.
Well, I was reading on this, and first of all, there's a lot of people contesting that the what's the radar called again?
There's LiDAR.
LiDAR, that's it.
And then there's also the SAR.
Which one's the one that the Italian and the Scottish guy developed?
I think that's the LiDAR.
The LiDAR, okay.
Yep.
That this even has the capability of truly being able to see that into that depth and actually get such an accurate picture. Because if you look at the picture, which I think you're going to post, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
On the actual picture, it's very interesting. And there's a lot of theories around this. One, they said that it could be a structural, which wouldn't make sense to me.
The underneath part that it's structural?
Structural to, well, the very first one is that it's rock formations that have just developed underneath it. I'm gonna imagine that one's gonna be disqualified very quickly. Second, that it's a structural thing to help solidify the pyramids, which also doesn't make much sense to me. But one that's very interesting, and I know a lot of people want it to be this fourth option, that it has like the lost records of whatever. I don't know. It's that fantasy bullshit.
Like Atlantis?
Yeah, not Atlantis, but it's these Egyptian records and all this stuff. But what they are saying is that these do look like they could be ventilation shafts, and their sole purpose of these kind of the tubular structures that have the kind of winding around them.
It looks like a coil,
yeah,
right?
Like a coil. They all connect to those departmental rooms. If you look at the structures, they're all to those rooms. They think these are like more rooms beneath that have different purposes, and that those kind of funnel areas are how you'd get to those rooms.
So we may have just scratched the surface on this thing.
Yeah, the pyramids might just be the above ground section, which we still don't even know what the fuck they are. We don't, like you said, we don't know how they made them. Some of these quarries are hundreds of miles away, right?
Yeah.
Like hundreds of miles away.
And that's the thing. We know where the quarries are that the limestone was extracted from, where the limestone was extracted from the earth that was used to actually build the pyramids. So we actually know where that is.
And the weirdest part is, yeah, we know where they are. We can find them, right? And we were always just taught, like, just so easily to believe that, oh yeah, these people just used, pulleys and ropes to do this. And it's like, the precision that they built this with, there's no fucking way that it's just a bunch of people using pulleys and ropes.
Yeah.
Right? And what I find even more interesting on the Sphinx itself, if you look beneath, I think we talked about this once, or it might have been on a different podcast, the base structure of it, based off the weather, like they can see erosion and stuff like that, it doesn't even line up historically to the same time period as the Sphinx above it. They were made at two different times, and not like, it just took them a while to construct it. Like, they're not even made of the same stone or at the same time. So it's almost like this was added on much later.
Well, and you know what else is interesting is behind the Sphinx, there's an opening to a shaft that goes down into a network of tunnels underneath the Sphinx.
Correct.
And this has been known about for a long, long time. I don't even want to spit a date out because I really don't know. I do know that Zawi Hawass, he claimed that he went into the tunnel that was underneath the Sphinx, and he said that it really just didn't go anywhere, and he didn't really find it very interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah. And and that's the thing I find really interesting about like all these academics that are really into like the kind of like the modern accepted history of Egypt. People like Mr. Hawass and a lot of other people like him, they're very vested in this narrative that the pyramids were built by skilled laborers or that they were built by slaves, which, a very common argument that I've heard throughout my life is that basically the pyramids were just built by waves and waves and waves of thousands and thousands of slaves. And that, like, let's say, and what the argument would go something like this, that the only thing that's more productive than like 8,000 slaves is 10,000 slaves. And the only thing more productive than 10,000 slaves is like
20,000.
Yeah, 20,000 slaves. What's more productive than 20,000 is 30,000. Well, the thing is, you're not going to get very good work from people whose only incentive is to not get like whipped. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So the thing is, slavery is a bad means of labor in general. Yeah. And in many ways, aside from it being immoral, right? Which is clear, slavery was and is a very, very immoral is a very, very immoral thing in the world. Everybody is better off with it not existing. But but it's really weird to me that you have this like class of historian and archaeologists that will try to argue that that these massive pyramids that they were just built, that there were just like tens of thousands of slaves that were used to build it, and they don't have to provide you with any kind of like serious analysis of their ideas or their theories. All that they have to do is just say, well, okay, well, if we don't think 15,000 slaves would have been able to build the pyramids, then okay, 30,000 slaves built the pyramids. And then if somebody comes along and says, well, that wouldn't be enough, then they'll just say, oh, 40,000, 50,000.
And I guess here's my point, is that what we forget is that no matter how we viewed the labor, right, or the immorality, we could get caught up on the morality of slave labor and all this stuff, but no matter what, they still had to be fed, they still had to be housed, they still had to be watched, right? You still had to apply that workforce.
Right.
Which means that there's a cost to it. Yeah. And I guess my point would be, we have been led to convince or just accept it at face value that none of those pyramids were built within a lifetime, right? I mean, these pyramids were built over a long period of time. That they invested all of this for the grandeur of one burial ground. Like, it had no other purpose. All of this labor went to being a monument to one pharaoh's burial ground. I don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, no society. Slave labor was used for a lot of things, right? The amount in the workforce to build a giant pile of rocks with such precision, such care, all these tunnels that go to all these different areas, and the sole purpose is to put one guy in it. I just don't believe it. There had to be more. There had to be more significance to what the Egyptians are doing. And like you said, all of that, and we can't find one fucking person buried there. Right. They just decided.
If it were a burial chamber, you would find one body in there, wouldn't you?
They just decided that's what we're building it for. I changed my mind. Don't bury me there.
Yeah,
that's insane to me.
It's crazy. Yeah, and that all this blood and all this treasure would be poured into building these big, massive three-dimensional triangles, and you wouldn't use them for anything. Like that, they're completely empty on the inside. That there's not a thing inside. That it's like a giant empty coffin, so ultimately I think that is the most that is a very, very interesting thing. And I find it really interesting that you don't only find pyramids in Egypt, right?
Correct.
You find them in the New World. Mm-hmm. You find them, you even find them in China. You find ziggurats in the Middle East. You find burial mounds in North America that were built to look like pyramids. So it's very interesting to me. It's almost like it's it's a vestige from a period in human civilization that we don't know really anything about.
What would be interesting, and which I would jump on quickly, would be to see if they go do these radar pictures, if these same chambers with coils around them are underneath these other pyramids.
That would be fascinating.
I think they should jump on that quickly. What do you think they could be? Not the pyramids themselves, because I know we can go on that for. What do you think these underground chambers would be? Well, I guess you would almost have to clarify what the pyramids you would think they are.
I think that they are just in general. So here, the commonly held belief among archaeologists and Egyptologists and everybody in the world of academia and all the institutions, their doctrine regarding the age of the pyramids is that they were built over a period of time roughly between 2700 and 1500 BC. That they were built sometime within that time period. There are a lot of arguments to the counter that they're probably far older than that. I actually believe now. It's too bad I don't have a tinfoil hat here next to me to put on while I say this, but I think the pyramids are a leftover remnant from the Antediluvian world. And by antediluvian, I mean the world before the cataclysmic flood.
That's yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying that for anybody that didn't know what the word antediluvian means.
Got it. That's interesting, actually.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, and that would actually line up with the age discrepancies in a lot of these structures. Because I actually read this is a tidbit. Sorry, we're good right back to that point. If you think about it, people's time perception of Egypt, they try to kind of blend it all together. And we are closer, you and I, to sitting in a room with Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to when the Sphinx was built.
That's ridiculous.
So
that's true.
Like people put Cleopatra and the Sphinx, and they're like Egypt.
And Cleopatra was a Greek.
Yeah, no, I know she was Greek.
Yeah, but that's probably a lot of people don't know that.
Oh yeah, she was a Greek. For Ptolemy.
Yeah, yep.
So, but they just Cleopatra, right? King Tut, the Sphinx, the pyramids, Egypt, time period, right here. And they, in their mind, they just kind of lump it all together. But like I said, you and I are closer to physically touching Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to when the Sphinx was built. That's how long this spans. So it lines up perfectly with like you said, a flood happening. And then, dude, that's very interesting. I never gave that a lot of thought.
So think about this. One of the oldest written narratives that exist that we have historical record of is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which goes back to Sumeria, which is a super super old document. Like it goes back. I think it's like I don't want to butcher the age of it, but it's multiple thousands of years old. Here.
When did historians think the flood happened?
Epic of Gilgamesh age.
I'm gonna look. Go ahead, look that up real quick.
Okay, so the Epic of Gilgamesh is considered to be one of the oldest pieces of literature, and it dates back to between 2150 and 1400 BC. So, that being the case, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there is a character in the Epic of Gilgamesh, not Gilgamesh himself, but there's a character that is named Atenapeshtun. And I think that's how you pronounce the name. And Atenapeshtun is an old man that found favor with the gods and was preserved during the flood, during the global cataclysmic flood. Mm-hmm. And I often wonder if he is the historical figure that would later be named in the Torah as Noah. You know,
that makes sense.
And this is another thing too. Think about the Greeks. So the Greeks had a flood story. where it basically kind of mirrors the Noah story. Now, obviously, I believe the Noah story to be true. But
As do I.
Right, but that doesn't mean that that objectively true story, that other cultures wouldn't have recollections of it, right? So now the Greeks had had their own story of a cataclysmic flood myth. And remember that the philosopher Plato is the one that first talks to us about Atlantis having existed. And Plato says that the way he came to know about Atlantis was from his grandfather, I believe, who is named Solon the Great, the leader of Athens. And that Solon, when he was a young man, when he was a part of the Athenian, what was the Athenian Congress, the Athenian Council, or whatever it was. I don't remember what that was called, but he was a high-ranking member of that. And when Solon was a young man, he went to Egypt, and Solon befriended some very, very old Egyptian priests, and the Egyptian priests talked to him and explained to him about Atlantis, how there was once this great, powerful civilization, and that basically it became very, very corrupt, and it was avenged by the gods. You know, and it ended up it was destroyed in a global cataclysmic flood. Well, I'm not sure if I don't know if Plato said that it was a global cataclysmic flood, but there was a cataclysmic flood that destroyed Atlantis, and that Atlantis at that time was below the ocean, right? And the only thing Plato says is that it was west of the Pillars of Hercules. And there are a lot of arguments as to what the Pillars of Hercules are. Some people say it's Gibraltar, down where Morocco and Spain come together, at the entrance to the where the Mediterranean and Atlantic come together. But so Plato says that the story of Atlantis comes down from Egypt, and that the Egyptian priests understood Egypt to have been a civilization that was based upon kind of the kernels of the original civilization that was wiped out in the flood. And I kind of wonder if the pyramids were supposed to act as like a backup system for the civilization that existed prior to the flood. And maybe it's a crude form of maybe the pyramids are a form of technology that we can't even understand.
Well, if you think about it, and to go along with that, I actually am very intrigued with your theory on that, because the building of the pyramids, they have it between 15 and 2,700 years ago, right? Or I'm sorry, BC. So before, right?
And that's the estimate by today's experts, right?
By today's experts, but then you have to add another 2,000 years onto that for 80. That lines up perfectly. They think the flood happened between 45 to 7,000 years ago, would be the estimate. Well, that lines up perfectly.
Yeah.
Lines up perfectly. And if you look, that would explain when you start getting into people like, well, Christianity just repeats a lot of these other cultures' religious stories. Maybe it's not repeating them. Maybe that's the interpretation of those societies after the flood.
Right.
Because they wouldn't have a lot of written word. They would have stories passed down. So they would be word of mouth stories.
Yeah.
So it would be the perception of those cultures after the flood. It would be all they know. So when you see these similarities, they might just be telling the original stories that the Christians always knew to be true.
That's exactly right.
Oh, that's wild to think of like that, actually.
Now, there is an underwater... Okay.
That's interesting.
So, off the coast of Japan, and this is something interesting for everybody to look up. There is something called the Yanaguni Monument, and some call it a pyramid.
The Yanaguni Monument.
Yep, the Yanaguni Monument. It's spelled Yonaguni Monument. Now, it was discovered by a diver off the coast of Japan in 1987.
Japanese diver?
I'm assuming.
Okay.
So the monument or pyramid, as most people refer to it as. So the monument is 50 meters long. So think 50 yards long. So that would be about half the length of a football field. Football field is 100 yards,
Correct.
right? And it's about 20 meters wide. So about a quarter of a football field. It is located about 25 meters below the surface of the ocean. And basically it looks like a giant step pyramid. Now, what I'm going to do is type in age estimate. And I'm pretty sure I know what the age estimate is. Okay, so the age estimate for this pyramid it's estimated to be somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years old, but there are a lot of very, very serious archaeologists that will argue it may even be 8,000 to 10,000 years old.
Which would make sense again.
And here, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you. So these are pictures of it off the coast of Japan.
Oh, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and it basically it looks like a step pyramid.
It's just a step pyramid, exactly.
Yeah, see, like in this picture, for instance, you can see the side. And keep in mind, this is half a football field long or in length. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about like some little tiny structure or something that may or may not be man-made. This thing is huge.
And this is definitely a man-made structure.
Yep, and
you can tell.
Yeah, and the thing and the thing is, these are 90-degree angles. You know, there's a famous saying that, generally speaking, straight lines don't occur in nature, right? So when you see a straight line, you're generally dealing with something man-made, and especially when you have something that's this large, and you even have like, you can even see in this picture how you've got like steps.
Yes.
You know, so the thing is, you couldn't even argue that this is like layers of sediment or something like that.
It's definitely a man-made structure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you'd have much debate on that.
Right. And so I know I seem to be jumping, or that we seem to be jumping around a lot, but the thing is, there seems to be a connection between the Yonaguni monument, the Egyptian pyramids, the pyramids in Central America that, in my mind, these are all leftover structures that are all kernels of a previous civilization that existed prior to the flood. Mm-hmm. And this is another wild thing to think about. Okay, so I know I'm about to.
You're about to blow some minds.
Yeah. So I'm about to put on a second imaginary tinfoil hat.
You're about to blow 28 minds.
Now. Oh, 28? Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. So what if we're starting to reach the level of technology and selfishness that led to our original cataclysm?
Yeah.
You know? Like, what I would say is that when we get to the point that we can truly understand what these structures were and what they were used for, and if these structures, these pyramids and temples and things, if they were actually a crude form of technology, and we're able to figure out what they were used for, that's probably a sign that we're nearing the end of something. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe I could be totally wrong about that.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
But except this time it ends in fire.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that would be the end of this age, and it would be the beginning of a new one.
Well, that's what Einstein said. Remember?
Oh yeah.
He goes, "I don't know what weapons they'll use in World War III, but in World War IV, they'll definitely use sticks and stones."
Sticks and stones.
Yeah. So I mean, shit, man, that's a lot. That's a lot. You could follow that rabbit hole and make connections, and really start connecting a lot of unknown history together.
Yeah, and you know, that's the really interesting thing. And you know, this is something that you and I we talked about when Justin was on the podcast with us around Christmas time. Is, you know, we seem to be nearing the end of the post World War II consensus. You know, we seem to be nearing the end of this whole social order that was established at the end of World War II. Mm-hmm. And the thing that The thing that I am curious about is, or I guess the thing I find interesting is that at the beginning with the end of World War II, we had we kind of had a new narrative for understanding world history, and it was largely through materialism. Mm-hmm. You know, it was largely through saying that the economy is what drives like progress and development.
Correct.
And before that, the way that people would understand progress and development would be not just through the lens of the economy, but would also be through like religious development, through moral development, through all these different things. And I think we're nearing the end of the materialistic, which when you get into materialism, you really get into looking at things through a type of Marxist lens, you know, because that's essentially what Karl Marx said, is that the driver of history is the economy. That's the only thing that drives history.
That drives it.
You know, and that was, you know, that was Marx's, you could call it insight or whatever. But I think we're nearing the end of that, and we're nearing the end of that paradigm. And I wonder what the new paradigm is going to end up being. And when we shift paradigms to something new, I wonder how that will impact. I wonder how that will impact our view of our past. Mm-hmm. If we'll weave a new story of our past that's different from the one that we were taught in school.
Dude, that is a lot. That's deep, dude. You went deep today. Usually you're shallow, dude. You're like a 1-inch puddle of water.
No,
today,
I'm not.
You had
no
depth, dude.
I always have depth, always.
Dude, blowing my mind today. Okay,
dude. Listen, every conversation I have is like the Marianas Trench.
Okay, wow.
Every single conversation I have,
dude,
always.
Dude, you're not as deep as that pyramid. I can tell you that.
No, I'm deeper.
Is the Yagani? What is it? Yagani?
The Yagani Monument.
Yagani Monument, dude.
The Yanaguni Monument.
Yanaguni.
Yeah. But that's the wild thing about the Yanaguni Monument is there are people that theorize it's like 10,000 years old, or there are even people that think it may be 20,000 years old. Mm-hmm. You know, so, but you know, the thing is, you know, with this stuff, we can really only speculate because
that's all we can do. We don't know shit.
Exactly, but you know, I do think that there's a certain liberty in being realistic about what we know and what we don't know. Correct. You know, and I think what tends to happen is we as a society, we as human beings in our civilization, I think it kind of happens in waves. You know, where we end up having like a big crisis, whether it's a war or it's some kind of a disaster, you know, like we had World War II. So from the American standpoint, we had World War II. 80 years prior to that, we had the Civil War. 80 years prior to that, we had the Revolutionary War. Mm-hmm. And then roughly 80 years prior to that, I think we had the I forget what the big war was with the French. And George Washington was a very young man. I don't remember what that was, but we tend to have a crisis, mm-hmm. and then we have like a big resolution of the crisis, and then we have like a period of stability, and then there's like a big undoing of the stability, and then there's a new crisis. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think World War II was the crisis that kind of set the paradigm for the world that we were born into. And now we're far away enough, or there's enough years that have passed between us and World War II that there's really nobody left that feels like they need to defend it anymore, that feels like they need to defend the paradigm.
When we were younger,
there were a lot of World War II vets still alive. A lot of them were still working. A lot of them were still running this machine, mm-hmm. you know?
I'd say over the last 10 years, you watched it disappear.
Right. And so you have a lot of people that fundamentally don't understand how this paradigm was wired, you know, and what it was wired for. So now there are a lot of people that are just honestly raising questions about this paradigm, and they're saying, well, why do we have to do it this way? Why do we have to do it that way? And then we had like the COVID crisis, and we've had a lot of crises happen in our lifetimes.
Holy shit, man, a lot.
Yeah. So the thing that I'm thinking is we're at the beginning of we're at the beginning of like a big reset of the culture that will kind of set the trajectory for the next paradigm that will last for 80 years to a century.
I was going to say for the next 80 years.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly won't live to see the undoing of this new paradigm.
No matter how old I am, you will always be older. And significantly so. Like, I'm 34 years young. What are you, 40?
No. 36.
You're old enough that you don't even remember your age. You're older than 36.
No, I'm 36.
No, you're not.
36.
37.
No, I'm not 37 yet, and we do not round up.
You were born in 87?
Mm-hmm.
You're 3 years older than me.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I'm 37, yeah.
Yeah, you're old enough not to know your fucking age. I can tell you that. Yeah, you gonna argue with me, dude? No, dude, I'm 36.
Well, so the thing I always say is we round down. You know,
round down. Okay, well, I'm 30.
Well, then so am I. All right. So I guess that makes us the same age, then, asshole. All right. So do you have any finishing thoughts?
No, dude, this is very interesting. I actually want to take a deep dive into this. I'll probably. I know me. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole in this, so I'm probably going to be tweeting out some pretty crazy conspiracy theories.
Do it. And follow Nico on Twitter on The Rejected Gentleman.
Oh, The Rejected Gentleman. What's your handle? What are you?
I just have a burner Twitter right now.
Oh, you just the burner Twitter. I like it, dude. Hey, it's cool enough. All right,
yeah. Just long story short, I started having to deal with a bunch of stupid Ukrainian bots on there.
Oh, okay, got it.
And so I was just like, I'm done.
Well, I'll be posting on there. So, and I'm gonna follow up with this. I'm gonna come out with some crazy shit.
Yep.
I'm gonna connect some dots. Baby.
Let's do it, man.
All right, dude. Good
All right.
podcast. Good stuff. Love you guys. Talk to you soon.
Peace.